Thank you for watching this video. My name is Bram and I'm the CEO of Baserow. I'm going to explain how you can use the Baserow API as backend for your application in a live coding session. In this demo, I've already created a simple Nuxt application. It's a to-do task tracker, but the data isn't actually saved. So we're going to use the Baserow API to actually store the data in a Baserow table. To start a simple Nuxt project, you can run this command. I've already done that, so I'm just gonna change to that directory. I'm already in that directory. Run yarn dev to start the development server. Wait a second before it starts. And what you can see here is a task management tool. It's a super simple application, not meant for production or to look nice, just to be functional in terms of adding tasks. So I could add a sixth task here. Click on two tags, edit, and then it will be added to the list here. I can easily mark which tasks have been finished, and it's also possible to delete a task permanently. How does this look? Currently, this is a Nuxt application that I've already created here. So we have a very simple template. There is barely any styling added here because that's I just want to show how it works functionally. As you can see here, we have like a template. We have a simple form with the name input. We have a simple form with the tags input. And we have a for loop that shows the tasks that are in there. A checkbox to show whether the task is done or not. We have a small piece of code here that will show the actual tag name and the link to delete the task. If you look at the data model, it's pretty straightforward. These two properties are used for the new form. This is to indicate the loading state of the new form. This is an array with an overview of the tags that you can choose from, and this is an overview of the tasks that we've added here. There are a couple of helper methods to, for example, add a new task, to get a tag, just to get the name of that tag, to get a new task ID, because this ID needs to be unique, and to delete the task. As you can see here, it's all very static. So if I go back to the browser here and I would refresh this page, click on the refresh button, you would see that it resets to the original state, which makes sense because the code is static this way. That's not what we want to do. We want to save this data in a Baserow table so that it will be persistent. So if you refresh the page or if you check it from your mobile phone or from another device, that the data will actually persist. So to do that, we first need to create the schema in Baserow. So I'm going to switch to my Baserow account. I've already created an account and I'm already signed in. And I'm going to create the initial schema of the database. So I'm going to create a new table. I'm going to call it tasks, for example. Start from scratch. And I'm going to try to replicate this data model that we have here with the name, tags, and done as good as possible. So I'm going to change this to lowercase name. I'm going to change this one to done, but I want to have a Boolean field, which will mark it as true or false. And I'm going to change this to a link to another table. So we have not actually created the tags table yet, so I'm going to do that first. So I'm going to create a tags table here. This one is going to be even simpler, so I can just delete all the fields here. I'm just going to call this tag 1, tag 2, tag 4, tag 5, just to keep things simple. And then from the tasks table, I'm going to change this field type to a link to table field, and I'm going to make a relationship with the tasks table. So I'm just going to add task 1, task 2 here. Maybe this one is done already. Let's rename this field to the proper name and name it tags. Also lowercase to match the data structure that we have in the Nuxt application already. Maybe make a relationship with two tags, for example. So the ideal way for your application to communicate through Baserow is via the REST API. So you can click on the three dots here and then click on View API Docs. And this will give you a very nice API documentation page of the table of the database that we've just created. So the first table that you see here is the tasks table. Here you have an endpoint named list rows. This endpoint shows a nice example of which URL you should call, and it gives you a couple of examples in various formats how the HTTP request should look like and how the HTTP response will look like from Baserow as well. So to give this a quick test, I'm going to use an API REST client that I have installed in my browser here. I'm going to copy this API URL and call it. So obviously I expected this to fail because I have not provided any authentication credentials. So as you see here, authorization, this is like a header that we need to add to the HTTP request. It expects a token and then the token value. We have not yet created a token, so I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to go click on Open Database. I'm going to click on my user profile here on settings, click on database tokens, create a new database token. Oh, for this workspace, I'm just going to call this one demo token. Show all the databases that it has access to. So currently, this token has create, read, update, and delete access to all the tables in this, or all the databases in this workspace, actually. That's perfectly fine for this example. So I'm just going to copy the authentication token. I'm going to add a new header here, authorization token space, and then the actual token will be added here. Call this one, send the request, and as we see here, this is the response that we're getting back. We're seeing task 1, task 2, exactly the tasks that we have created in our table here. If I would create a third task, maybe add another tag 4, and now I'm going to make the request again. You're going to see that the count has increased to 3, and we're also going to see task 3 that was created here. This is perfect because this is actually what we want to do in our application as well. Instead of showing these static tasks, we want to list the tasks that are actually in our table. So we just have to translate this API request, add it to the application, and use that data. So how can we do that? If I go back to the application, I'm going to make tasks empty in this case. What I'm going to do here, it's not perfect code, but I'm going to add a mounted function. This mounted function is called whenever this component will load. And in that mounted function, I'm going to make an API request. So in this case, make this function asynchronous. I'm going to do await use fetch, and then I need to provide the URL there. So I'm going to go back to our API documentation, back to the tasks table, list rows. This is the URL that I need to call. So these are the options that I'm going to add. The method is get, in this case, headers, authorization token dash, and then our authorization token. I should be able to extract it from the API client here. Get the data out of it. Let's call this one tasks, and do a quick console.log on tasks.value. Let's see what that content brings. So if I would refresh this page, open the console, refresh it again, open this object, target. Now we can actually see that we have reproduced the same response. We can see task 1, task 2, task 3, but now we need to inject this into the data of the Nuxt application. So I'm just going to call this dot tasks is tasks dot value. All right, let's see what this does with our application. Okay, so it says task is null. Where is that error coming from? Um, oh, that's because tasks.value, if we look at the result here, um, target, it's because we need to have the results object. So here we actually want to say results. That should add the correct array to the data object. Okay, so now it fails because options.get tag is undefined, and that's because the data structure has slightly changed. So if we go back to this API request, we're going to see that the tags is now an array with objects instead of just an array with IDs. So what I need to do here is I need to go to tags. I still want to have the for loop, but this is actually a tag object. So I don't need to use the get tag method here anymore. I can just use tag.value because that's the structure that we have here. For each tag, we have a value property that we can call. Let's nicely remove the get tag method as well because we don't need that anymore. And if we go back to our application, we should see that this is actually in a working state. This is actually listing the tags that we have stored in our Baserow table. So just to test this, if I go back to the table, I'm going to add task 4 with a link to tag 5. Refresh this page. Now we see we actually have the task 4 linked to tag 5. Of course, if I would delete one of the tasks, it's going to delete it here. But if I refresh the page, it's not actually going to be saved. How are we going to do that? This task actually needs to be deleted from the table itself. If we go back to our API documentation, we can go to the delete row endpoint because this is the endpoint that we need to call to make sure that the task is actually deleted from the database table. Going back to our code, this link here calls the delete task method. We're going to make a change here. Currently, there's a set timeout. I don't think we're going to need that set timeout anymore because we have an HTTP request that's being made as well. We're going to call useFetch, copy this URL over here. At the same authentication header. So because this is kind of like a repetition, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create headers, like a headers object that we can reuse in between those two requests. So I can do this. Scroll down, apply that here as well. We can remove this set time out completely. And let's go back to our code to see if that has the desired result. So if I hit this delete button, okay, so this is actually failing because it says we have not injected the correct row ID here. I'm going to replace this URL with these type of quotes. Add task ID because this is equal to the row ID here. And now let's try it one more time. Refresh the page, hit delete, and we can see that it actually completes the request here. So in order to show this nicely, I want to make this async and await so that we see a loading animation just before the task is actually deleted. Okay, so this seems to be working. And if we go back to our table, it doesn't look like it's actually being deleted. So I'm going to go back to the API documentation and take a look at why that is. So let's first take a look at this request. What's the request that we're making? Do we have the right headers added. The authorization header seems to be correct. Going to the response. Okay, so it looks like we're making a get request, but this actually needs to be a delete request. So how did I know that? I looked at the response and I saw the actual object, which is not supposed to be returned if you make a delete request. So let's try this one more time. Hit delete. Okay, now we can see we're actually making a delete request. And we see that the response is empty. And if I go to the table, I can see that task 3 has actually been deleted. This is working great. The next thing that I want to update is if I change this checkbox, so the done state of a task, that actually needs to be updated. How am I going to approach that? I'm going to take a look at the checkbox that we have here. Introduce a change event. In that change event, I'm going to call update done task. Just provide the whole task object in there. Task. We can do a console.log task.done to verify if we have the correct state in there. So if I click that, it's going to be true. If I click it again, it's going to be false. So now we just need to make another HTTP request. So I'm going to make this method async. I don't think we have to show a loading state here. I'm going to copy the request that we're making here, but just going to change it to a patch request. The body. How should the body look? We can take a look at the API documentation again. Switching to there, opening the tasks table and see update row. So I guessed correct. It was actually a patch request that we need to make. Let me copy the full URL that we want to use and replace this with the task ID. And now we can see what we can provide here to update the done value. So that's just this. I'm gonna put that in here, task.done. Let's use single quotes to stay consistent. Okay, let's see if this is going to work. Go back to our application, click the checkbox, see which patch request we're gonna make. Request done is true. Response also confirms that done is true. So if we refresh this page, we're gonna see that it's persistent. So if I check them all, and I go back to the database, we're going to be seeing that these are all checked. And yeah, if I uncheck them all here and I'm going to refresh the page, they're going to be unchecked. Cool, so this part is now working. We also want to have the ability to create a new task. So if I create a sixth, I choose these two tags, create. It's going to add it, but this is not actually stored persistently. So we need to make those code changes. First thing first, we need to have a list of tags that we can actually choose from here. We haven't fetched that from the database yet. So we want to get that from the tags table here. Going back to the API documentation, to the tags table, we want to use the list rows endpoint here again. I think we only have to load them once on start. So I'm going to go back to the mounted function. I'm going to copy this request. I'm going to make tasks tags empty. We can just do this. And the only thing that changes here is the table ID. So I think this should already work. It does not work. So what's going wrong here? Let's do a console.log on text.value.results. See what's in there. Okay, so we have a capital name here. We can change that in our database schema. Go to the tags table. Call this name. Now it's actually working. It's correctly populating the tags. So if I replace this with cars, for example, and I refresh the page, we're actually going to see cars here. Okay, so when the form is submitted, we now want to create a new task. And in order to do that, we need to make an API request and update the state of our Vue application. So we already have this method add task from form. I'm going to go to this method. We already see we have a create loading state. I'm just going to copy this one, this API request here. Make this one async, and now I'm going to do a post request. I'm checking the docs to quickly confirm that. Go to the tasks table, create a row. It actually needs to be a post request, so that's what we're going to make. The done state should be false by default. We have a name here, which is equal to this name as a vmodel to form name. So that's the property that we can use. So we could do form name tags, this form tags. We want to reset the form when this is done. So I'm going to copy these values out of here. And we would need to add the task to the view data state. So this task.push. I think we can just use task.value here. This is because when you do a post request to this endpoint, it's going to respond with an object that already matches the structure that we expect here. So we take that object back, we add it to the tasks array so that we can actually see it. And then we reset the form state so that we can add another task again. And it also means that we don't need this method anymore, and we don't need this method anymore. Okay, so let's see if this is going to work. Back to our application. I'm just going to call this new task. I'm going to hit cars and tag 3. Click on the create button. Okay, can't access lexical declaration task before initialization. Okay, so where is that coming from? That's because we're probably using the wrong API URL. Going back to the documentation, I'm just going to copy this one. And try it again. New task, cars and tag 3. Now it is actually working. Cool. So our application is fully working right now. We can create tasks, we can see them, we can update the done state, we can see the tags, and we can delete them. I want to elaborate a little bit more about the API token permissions that we have. So I'm going to move this window a bit to the right so that we can try it live and make this window a little bit smaller so that we can show the API token settings. So as you can see here, this token has create, read, update, and delete access to our full database. So that means the tasks table and also the tags table. So if you publish this in an app or in a website, if you publish the token somewhere, it means that everyone who has that token, and that token is publicly readable, will be able to create, read, update, and delete changes to all the databases in this table. That's not something that we need, because for our application, we just need to be able to create tasks, update tasks, delete tasks, and list the tags. So what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to give this token any permissions. So if I'm going to run this get request, it's going to respond with no permissions to the table. So in the tasks table, we want to be able to create, read, update, and delete. And in the tags table, we only want to be able to read. This is so that If you have the token, it's not possible to add additional tags or delete additional tags. So as you can see here, I can read from the tasks table, but if I'm going to try to create something in the tags table, that should not work. So if I go to the documentation, tags table, create row, look at this nice example here. Copy this over, post request. Yes, this is correctly failing with a no permission to table. But if I would give it permission, if I quickly go back, and I'm going to say, yeah, now you have create permission. Now it's going to succeed. I do need to add a missing header here, but now it is actually going to succeed. Um, yeah. That's all I wanted to show you in this video. I hope it's going to be useful. I'm going to publish all the code on GitHub and GitLab so that you can take a look at the initial state and the final state of the changes that we've made. And yeah, I hope this will help you use Baserow as a backend for your application. Thanks.